If you haven't heard about it, there is a lot of design that's happening in the White House right now. And we want to bring in Michael J. Allen. He is a Northwestern Associate Professor of History to talk a little bit more about what's going on there. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's just right off the top give an overview of the renovations that are happening. This is for a banquet area, right?
Yes, a ballroom, as I understand, that should seat. Reports have been anywhere from 600 to 900 people, which is larger than the East Room, which is typically used for state dinners and such things.
Yeah, and as I understand it, it's been a while since we've seen renovations of this magnitude. Can you talk from a historical standpoint about maybe some other major renovations that really had people talking at the White House before?
Yeah, this is the biggest building project that's happened at the White House probably since it was built in the late 18th century. It was constructed originally in the 1790s. There have been some significant changes to the building since then to reflect the growth of the presidency and just the growth of the nation, the president's staff, et cetera. The most extensive renovation in the building's history since it was built was the addition of the east and west wings. That happened in mainly in the early 20th century under Teddy Roosevelt and Howard Taft, who built the West Wing, which is where the president's office and his staff work, as well as the East Wing, which is traditionally more of the social center of the White House. The First Lady's offices are there. And the East Wing was subsequently expanded again in the 1940s, mainly to build a bunker underneath it for the president and his staff to shelter in the event of an attack on the United States. That was during World War II. But that was the most major expansion of the White House. The White House was then also kind of gut rehabbed under Harry Truman in the late 40s and early 50s, in part because the building was starting to literally fall down. And so President Truman spent much of his presidency living at Blair House on the Executive Square. And the building was torn down essentially to the studs. The foundations were repaired, the walls were repaired, and it was rebuilt. But that was a reconstruction that largely restored it to what it looked like beforehand, and was mainly for structural, sort of durability.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, there's renovations going on at the Fed, and there was so much made about Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, doing those renovations. And if this were to be finished first, I could see a lot more conversations happening about that. But this is kind of what President Trump does. I mean, he is used to building new things.
Yes, I mean, I think that's part of why this is happening now. I mean, historically, if you look at when the White House tends to be renovated in this way, it's usually with presidents who are aggressively asserting their power. So, I mentioned two major renovations earlier in the 20th century. One was under Teddy Roosevelt, a progressive president who really had a much more expansive vision of presidential power and U.S. power in the world. And he was expanding the presidency to match that. And so the White House expanded alongside of it. World War II and the early Cold War under Roosevelt and Truman are similar times when the United States is really assuming a much greater role in the world. The federal government is growing rapidly, in part to sustain that. And so the White House is expanded and grows again. And I think President Trump's doing something similar, but with his history of building in New York as a real estate developer. I think he also sort of associates himself with this type of project. His detractors would point out that the Trump Tower was built only after he tore down the Bonwit Teller building in Manhattan, which was considered, parts of it were considered a historical landmark, which he just destroyed. And so he has a reputation and a history not only of building, but also of destroying things. And I think he's doing both here.
Yeah, this is a $200 million project. 90,000 square foot ballroom. You mentioned some of the other things that he built or tore down. The financial aspect of it was also very controversial over the years.
The financial aspect of this project?
Of this project and several of his other real estate dealings over the years were very controversial.
Sure. He also has a history, as he's proud to say, of driving hard bargains with the people across the table from him, and that includes the people that sort of build his buildings, the way he finances his buildings, largely in the past through debt. I think in this case, the specific financing that he's drawing on here is somewhat of a mystery to me, and I think to most of the American people. To my knowledge, that hasn't been spelled out with any kind of care or transparency, and that's one of the many kinds of mysteries and concerns that surround this particular project.
Yeah. So there are several concerns here. I see it's supposed to have gold and crystal chandeliers, a gilded Corinthian columns, a coffered ceiling with gold inlays, gold floor lamps, checkered marble floor, 3 walls of arched windows looking out over the White House south grounds. Were you surprised at all by this?
Yeah, I think we're all surprised. I mean, in the sense that the White House has been largely unchanged since its construction 230 years ago. And so something of this magnitude really hasn't been done before. And so it's surprising in that sense. In another way, it's in keeping with some of the other changes he's made to the White House, the paving over of the Rose Garden, the adding of various kinds of gilded embellishments throughout the West Wing, throughout the Oval Office. It's very much kind of in keeping with the style of Mar-a-Lago and his general aesthetic tastes, and so maybe it's less surprising in terms of that. I think that one of the things that is somewhat controversial about this project is the size. It's going to be quite large. I think 90,000 square feet, if memory serves. It's going to, in some respects, overshadow the executive mansion itself. One of the things that I think many have expressed surprise about is how can he engage in such a significant redesign, essentially, of the White House grounds and property without any, consultation with the White House Historical Association and other kinds of architectural bodies that, as I understand it, are sort of tasked with overseeing historical preservation and design projects in federal buildings across the United States.
Yeah, and we can now see the demolition taking place. The White House communications director said that people are clutching their pearls. That's a direct quote. Pearl clutching right now. Why do you think people have such an emotional response to changes happening at the White House?
Well, I think it's largely because most people consider the White House to be the people's property and a kind of natural patrimony that belongs to all Americans. Presidents come and go. They occupy the White House for 4 to 8 years at a time, but then they leave and another president comes. And so to have an individual president radically transform this sort of symbol of the American state and American democracy in such a way without really consulting with other parties is rather anomalous. Even the construction of the White House itself was subject of a national design competition, that had architects throughout the country submit plans to a body headed by George Washington that selected those plans. And similarly, the last major renovation of the White House in 1951 also had a historic commission and an architectural commission that were part of the planning of that project. And so to have something that I think people feel belongs to them radically changed, really without much oversight, consultation, or any kind of process, is surprising and alarming to some Americans, perhaps even upsetting. As for the pearl clutching, I mean, the White House likes to say those types of things in response to any kind of criticism that it gets, but that doesn't mean that the criticism isn't warranted.
Yeah, they said that it was structurally weak and in danger of collapse. So they're just modernizing it. Do you see it the same?
Well, I'm not an architect, and I'm certainly not sort of capable of speaking authoritatively on that subject. I guess I would say that that strikes me as somewhat um, hard to believe, given that the Presidential Command Center, that protects the president and the first family in the event of such things as nuclear war is underneath of it. I doubt that it's about to collapse, but I really can't say.
All right. Thank you so much for your time on what you did have the ability to say based on the extensive research that you have done into U.S. political and diplomatic history. Thank you so much, Professor Allen.
Thanks for having me.